Hi, I'm Peter Beck from St. Edward's University in Austin, and I'm going to talk about a project that we have in Costa Rica, which looks at the role of economic incentives at conserving forests. And so this is a NSF-funded project under the International Research Experience for Students program. And it's been going on for 3 years. It's a collaboration between St. Edward's, Indiana University, and the Organization for Tropical Studies in Costa Rica. So over those 3 years, we've had 8 graduate and 8 undergraduate students who've gone down to Costa Rica for 10 weeks to conduct their research. And what motivated this project is the increase in tropical deforestation that we've seen since the millennium, and especially since the last 4 or 5 years, as we've seen here. And so much of this is, of course, the Amazon in Brazil under the current president, but also Colombia and other Amazon countries. But yet in Costa Rica, we see a different story. We see actually not just an increase, but a doubling of forest cover over the last 30 years. And so Costa Rica is clearly the only country that can make this claim. I mean, the only country that would be even close to making this claim. And so if we look at sort of the forest cover trends, we see that from the 40s to the 80s, we see the typical pattern of rapidly declining forest cover, going down from 75 to 21%. But then since the 90s, it's steadily increased. And in fact, it's doubled to over 50% now. But as FAO has noted, most of the increase has come in forest fragments. And so are these forest fragments effectively able to maintain ecosystem services like contiguous forests would be? And so what happened in Costa Rica to explain this? Well, it's largely a question of policies of the government. And so one thing that they've done is they've expanded the amount of protected areas, which is the traditional strategy for protecting land. So over 25% of the land area is protected. And so with that much land protected, it's going to be hard to protect more, right? So we're also going to need to focus on private lands. So on private lands, one thing that they've done is promoted ecotourism. And so this is a way that landowners can get money for maintaining the forest on their land. And so Costa Rica, of course, world renowned now for ecotourism, but that's very recent, really since the millennium, that people have gone down there for that. And then in the 90s, they revamped their forestry law. And so traditionally, forests have been managed for a sustainable supply of timber. Now that's in the US, that's all over the world. But in this 1996, what Costa Rica did is they legally recognized not just timber, but the value of ecosystem services, the role of forests in purifying air, purifying water, and so on. And so by legally recognizing this, it set the stage for, well, then we can pay for these services if they have this value. And so that set the stage for Costa Rica developing the Payments for Ecosystem Services program. And what this program does is it pays landowners to not cut down their forests, to maintain forests on their land. And so this PES program originated in Costa Rica and has since very rapidly spread throughout the world. We can see some of the countries here, Brazil, Bolivia, Mexico, and Latin America, Uganda, Mozambique, Kenya, in Africa, in Asia, China, Vietnam, Cambodia. And along with this rapid increase has been an increase in people studying it. And so one thing that we've seen is that most of this research has yielded inconclusive results as to whether PS actually causes people to want to increase forest or not. And so some of these studies have shown a slight increase, some of them have shown a decrease. Most of the effects, though, have been relatively small. And then even where we do see an increase, establishing causality is very difficult. So in Costa Rica, we've seen a doubling in forest cover. Well, how much of that is due to PES? Is any of it due to PES, or is it due to something else? And so with this project, so it's an IRIS project, so it's focusing on providing opportunities for students. So some of these students haven't done field research before, that haven't been abroad before. We're also focusing on underserved students. So 75% of our students have been from underserved communities in STEM. And then, like a traditional student research might be, if I have a project and I'm hiring a research assistant, they're going to go down there and do whatever protocol I've designed. But with IRIS, the goal is for the students to design and conduct the project. And so they're down there on their own. And so we guide them in designing the programs. We have Zoom meetings. Even before everybody was having Zoom meetings, we were doing Zoom meetings while they're down there to see how things are going. But they're the ones that are most responsible. And so the objectives of the project are, how do these incentives influence landowner decisions? Are they enough of an incentive to say, well, if you're a landowner, well, okay, I will maintain my forest. I won't cut it down for something else. And then when they're maintaining these forests and fragments on individual lands, how effectively are they at maintaining ecosystem services? So that's what we're looking at. And we're looking at 4 sites, these 2 research stations of the Organization of Tropical Studies, another research station run by OSA Conservation in the southwest of the country, and then areas out around Manuel Antonio National Park, which is the most visited national park in Costa Rica. So it's a big ecotourism site. And so as we mentioned, each student designs their own project. So here are some of them. Some of them, as you can see, are social questions. So they can be doing social research. Most of them are ecological questions. They can be doing ecological research. And so for the social questions, they're primarily doing landowner surveys, also key informant interviews. For the ecological questions, depends on what the focus is, but we've been measuring primate distribution, bat distribution, stress levels of primates, air and water quality, forest cover, some of the things we've been looking at. And so let's look at some of the outcomes. So how effective are these incentives at changing behavior? So if you look at the table on the left, one thing you can see is overwhelmingly, most people are not participating in either the economic incentives. And those that are, it's largely ecotourism. Even those that are doing PES, if you look at the both category, there's only 5 that are not doing PES and ecotourism as well. And then, so most people are doing both. And then when you ask them, most people that are doing an incentive are doing both. And then when you ask them, well, which is more important? Overwhelmingly, they say the ecotourism is contributing more to their income stream than PES. And then when we look at the causality question, how likely would these landowners be to convert their forests, for agriculture or whatever, if they weren't receiving economic incentives? And overwhelmingly, they say they wouldn't. They'd be unlikely to do that. And so, well, why wouldn't they do that if they're not getting economic benefits from it? Because as we know, the vast majority of them are not in either of the program. Well, interestingly, when we ask the question, do we see benefits from the forest? 2/3 of them say they do. And so most of these, of course, are not receiving economic benefits. So it must be other kinds of benefits. And then when we ask them, well, why are you conserving? And about half of them say for economic reasons, for half of them say other things. But if you look at the most important reason, it's largely non-economic benefits. Things like, the trees provide shade, or I like to look at them, or I like to see the wildlife, or for patriotic reasons, because Costa Rica is so well known for forest conservation, they feel good for contributing to that. If we look at some of the ecological outcomes, well, if we look at primate diversity, we see a difference in the protected areas, the research station and the national parks than outside on private lands. If we look at air quality, interestingly, we don't see a difference. We don't see a significant difference between the protected and the privately owned forests, both for current use pesticides and legacy pesticides. Where we do see a big difference is at the different research stations. Interestingly, so for La Selva, which is in a part of the country where there's a lot of big pineapple plantations, banana plantations, which use heavy amounts of pesticides. And so you can see there with current use pesticides, there's a big difference. We see it more going in. Obviously, they're not using it at La Selva, but we're seeing it there from those plantations. If we look at forest outcomes, both in primate density and forest cover, we see that Manuel Antonio and Piro score much better than the two OTS stations. And those two are the major sites for ecotourism. But interestingly, we see declining forest cover at all four sites, and even within the protected areas, we see declining forest cover. So, the amount is very small, and it's only 4 sites. It's not the whole country. But this is something interesting that deserves further research to see if this trend of increasing forest cover might be changing. So what are the implications of this? Well, first of all, we need to look at protected areas and private lands, not one or the other. A lot of the research says one of these doesn't work or the other one doesn't, but we really need both. And then we need to look at incentives from much more broadly than just looking at economic incentives, and look at non-economic values that could be incentives as well. And so looking at the outcomes, we've had 6 papers published with some of the students as co-authored. If we look at what the students have done afterward, the vast majority have either gone on to further graduate study using their field research experience, or they're working in environmental fields. And then for further research, the project's been renewed for additional 3 years. Of course, we haven't been able to do research for the last 2 years. We're hoping in 2022, we can start up again. And we're going to extend it to Uganda and look for some comparisons. Uganda also is an area with PES. If you're interested in more information, you can look at this profile in Scientia, whatever. And I'd like to thank the student researchers, the sponsors, of course, NSF, all our collaborators, OTS, IU, and St. Ed's. And thank you for listening. Thank you very much.